So there you go, how the president's address, Democracy Day address this June 12th. So this is about the, quite a lot that the president packed in that particular speech. And there's so many highlights and talking points on this particular day, Democracy Day.
It's actually very interesting to find out he mentioned some of the trending issues, one of which is the gender-based violence that's all over the place. And one of the maybe far less talked about issue of people living with disabilities. That's actually something that I think a significant number of people will look at, and look at that as a glowing tribute to Nigerians on our determination, to sustain democracy. And of course, that's really something. That is why many people are very vocal about whatever the opinion they hold about where we are.
Okay, so there you go. Agriculture, one of the important components of the administration. They've talked about how they want to, what they intend to do. So we'll come to that as well, where they highlighted the CBN's Anchor Borrowers Program, how different states and so many people also getting to grow the macroeconomy on that. And then speaking about the non-oil export sector.
That's where he talked about, that's why he talked about the export of cocoa. And I remember that, over the years, cocoa has been a mainstay, so to speak. Even before the oil became a mainstay for us, cocoa was what the Southwest, for instance, used in building its own region at the time, the First Republic into the Second Republic and all of that. So how far or how well we're able to build on that, I think it'll help.
Well, yes, indeed. Remember yesterday, the National Assembly was one, and then the president also in that speech talked about the National Assembly being an important part in the scheme of things, and how they have that relationship. And yes, we'll also see how and where we how they are faring in that regard.
How well that partnership serves the interests of the people is what it depends on who is viewing it.
So there are several parts of that which we will come to, but this morning we'd just like to quickly let you know that there are mechanisms that you can get across to us this morning on the program, our Twitter handles, so you can go ahead and don't forget, if you want to send any message, you can hashtag SDJune12, and then you could reach or mention any of those handles. But the Twitter question, which we did put out, so we expect you to go over there and vote. So we did ask you, what did you expect to have improved 21 years into our democracy? So that is the live feed of the Twitter page, and that is how you are all voting at the moment. So you need to quickly get in there and cast your vote before it runs out.
This is going to end in less than an hour.
Yep. Well, so far we've got over 6,000 people who have voted, but just go ahead and click on that. And especially now that the president has spoken about some of this, and so you can always see how you can reconcile this. What are your expectations 21 years on? Government in, government out, but the country will always remain. So what do you think?
Well, now I think we have Kayode also standing by from somewhere in Ikeja. We can have you right now, Kayode.
Well, yeah, to be precise, I'm at the home of late MKO Abiola. Well, we're here bright and early, just before the activities begin. But just bear in mind, because of COVID-19, there's perhaps not going to be much going on here right now. So while we're going to be waiting for the result of that poll, let's just take you down memory lane and, just walk you through what exactly happened. And this morning, I have with me the son of late MKO Abiola. He's a writer, he's an author, he's a linguist, he's a polyglot apparently. So this morning we're going to be speaking with Jamiu Abiola this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, nice to be here.
Well, I know this has become some sort of yearly thing. I hate to use the word ritual, but when we do this year in, year out, what is usually the central message for you?
The central message for me is that we have to look beyond what my father did and try to implement it and make sure that what he has done is something that we adopt ourselves as well. We cannot continue to say that he did this, he did that, without actually implementing some of these things and becoming more selfless. So I think it's a wake-up call, a clarion call to everyone to always look beyond what he did to what we can do today, so that his efforts will be continuous. Because if we learn from him and we do what he used to do in terms of thinking less of himself and more of others, then what he has done will now become progressively continuous. It will not just stop with his death. We would have implemented it and will continue to implement it in our own lives today.
Now, speaking of implementing, in current day Nigeria, when you look at governance, when you look at citizen engagement and all the other issues, how do you rate it in terms of what your father wanted to achieve? How would you rate what is happening currently in Nigeria?
It's very difficult to answer that question because the time my father lived, the global circumstances are completely different from what they are today. Today is a different ball game entirely, all over the world. In the United States, for example, 40 million jobs were just lost because of the COVID-19. And so many other challenges that have to do with terrorism, that have to do with cyber crimes. So it's a different time entirely. So unfortunately, most governments spend a lot of resources battling these new problems. And at the same time, they also have to dedicate resources to sustaining the infrastructure. So it's a very, very difficult time entirely. But I think a lot of people are doing well. We have democracy, and then we have hope. And I think what we just need now is a more uniform approach between the state and the federal. If the federal government is doing a lot and the states are not doing a lot, then it makes it difficult for progress to be noticed. So I think there should be a uniform approach in terms of like the strategies adopted by the federal government and the states, so that they can tally, since they are all for the same country, so that we can have the maximum outcome, maximum impact.
Now, I know, yes, the current administration has said June 12 will now be Democracy Day moving forward, and you applauded that, especially because of the significance of June 12, 1993. But usually, every year, there's always some form of demand. Is there a theme for this year? Is there something you want to push forward this year? Maybe something more that you think should be done?
Yes, and that's what I mentioned earlier on. I said that we shouldn't just look at June 12 as the sacrifices of Chief Moshood Abiola, Elijah Kudrat Abiola. Let's look at what we can actually do for our country as well. In line with what the late President Kennedy in the United States said, don't think about what your country can do for you. Think about what you can do for your country. So my own demand is not to the government per se, it's to the people of Nigeria to come out of their cocoons and do more in terms of like make things better from your own environment. Every step counts. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So I think that step, that action, should be taken collectively and individually by each and every one of us. So I want June 12th to send a message to people that instead of looking at others, look at yourself, so that we can progressively, collectively improve our society.
Okay, on a final note, what are the plans for today, on a final note?
Well, the plans are like we're having some visitors here. Of course, we're going to do as much as possible to maintain social distancing in line with keeping safe. And, we'll do what we can do as low-key as possible in view of the pandemic and what is happening. We will do as much as we can do to make sure that we use this opportunity to send a message to Nigerians as well that it's good to be safe and it's good to be careful.
Thank you very much. We'll be speaking with the son of late MKO Abiola right here at his residence. But I'd like to show you something else. Yes, we are going to show you what millennials definitely think about June 12. But this morning, we have a group of young people and they have a message for us. So let's show you. Hi, guys. Hi. Good morning. Good morning. So, you know what? Let's just get into it. What is this about?
Okay, we are here today to say, honor June 12, pass electoral reforms. We all understand what June 12 means to us, and we are very happy that June 12 is being celebrated as Democracy Day today. However, we are saying that we should go beyond just the ceremonies. We should pass electoral reforms so that democracy, election, which is the foundation of what we are celebrating today, is done in black and white, is done in truth and in all. And all of us here today are here to say, honor June 12, pass electoral reforms. We are ready to lead Africa. Thank you.
That's right. So you see young people from the Ready to Lead Africa movement putting out a message on this June 12 Democracy Day, and it's about electoral reform. So from here at the home of the late MKO Abiola, Skydo Kikilo, and back to you guys in the studio.
Fantastic, Kaide. Wow, millennials just telling us what a way to go, because, I mean, it's very important. And did you hear so much of that in the president's speech?
It was one of those things that I was expecting. Not even a mention of anything electoral. It's Democracy Day, and elections is a critical element in democracy. But of course, we know that we can always catch up on what the achievements of the president are. However, even yesterday while we were speaking with the National Assembly, this is one of those issues that we referenced, and we expected that would be part. Because it is already a big issue. There are 2 elections this year at least, and there are more that's going to come before 2023. But we wait, to see.
So the millennials are sharp. They are awake. They're watching.
One of the things that actually disturbs me is we need to intensify on June 12, 1990.
I'm going to have to disturb you so that we can bring in Makwe as well on this one. She is also on hand. Makwe, good morning.
Well, and happy Democracy Day to all of us. It's a new one, isn't it?
On behalf of the federal government.
Okay, so we'll get back to Makwe in just a moment. But, well, yes, indeed, the Al-Qaeda did also go out there to speak to a lot of other people concerning their impressions of democracy. They remember at that time there were so many who are there now who are not completely, they may not have the entire picture.
They just hear the name June 12.
And
what's this all about? They don't know.
So that's why if you take a look at June 12, the ideals of that day as it relates to democracy and how does it impact you? That's what we're about this morning.
We really would love for you to call as many people as need to get this message to, pick up their devices, get on YouTube, get on Twitter, wherever, to follow the conversation that we're going to be bringing to you today from this program up until later in the evening when we bring you a full series on what June 12, the ideals and all of that is about, especially in the light of the peculiarity of COVID-19.
Well, right now, hashtag June 12th, and then get your comments and your thoughts there. But remember, go out there and vote. So we will show the country what you all think should have improved 21 years into our democracy. But then, speaking about that particular report, well, yes, indeed, those are the handles that you can get across with. So let's have a look at it, and then we'll be back afterwards. All right, welcome back. So there you go. Some thoughts as to what are people thinking out there. What do they even think? So what a good way to also check, measure, and see where we are. But let's head now to our correspondent, Kayla Megwa. She's standing by at the villa to give us what is the mood right there at the moment. Good morning, Kayla.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Happy Democracy Day to you. And it's absolute silence, I have to tell you. There's no one here. It feels like it was just yesterday that we were at Eagle Square at this time last year, having such a great time, talking about the very first Democracy Day being celebrated on the 12th of June. And, of course, dignitaries from around the world. There were all these things going on. But, as you can see behind me, absolute silence. Just the gardeners working here at the villa. There's no one here. There's nothing going on today, which is quite sad because, there's a lot of things that have happened between last year and now. It would have been a great opportunity to reassess all of those things, and we're basically just watching to see what happens today. But at the villa right now, there's absolutely no one here and nothing going on, Chamberlain.
Yeah, so there you go. So the COVID era impacting on everything and anything, including, as the President did also say that much. So thank you very much indeed, Kayla, for your thoughts there. Okay, so, well, we were just going to say in line with what the President said, but we'll bring that a little later. But here in the studios, but before then, don't forget, you can go ahead and vote. We did put out a Twitter question. What do you think should have improved 21 years into our democracy? Is it education? Is it electricity, security, the economy? So you can go to our Twitter handle and vote. Well, this morning we've got Dele Farotimi, who is an author, he's a lawyer, he was an active participant, like every other student, he says. Thank you for coming on this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Well, when this day comes year on year, previously, even today, what goes through your mind, having gone through all that on June 12, 1993?
A lot of sadness. Very deep one, too, because I think of all the lives that were wasted, I use the word wasted deliberately because this wasn't what we marched for. This is not the democracy my friends bled for. This is not the democracy my generation died for. What we have today is a mockery of democracy.
Why do you say so?
I was afflicted for almost an hour listening to Mr. President rambling on what I would better describe as a budget speech rather than a Democracy Day declaration to the Nigerian people.
But what did you expect on a day
I
like this?
expected, as one of your correspondents who was at Abiola's house, was talking to a call of young people, and they were talking about electoral reform. We have a way of domesticating almost every terminology in Nigeria, and when we talk about democracy, the assumption is always that it's about the worth of a man's vote. The totality of the June 12 day, the day itself, the totality of the principle was about the value of the vote, the sanctity of the right of the citizen to freely express their desire as to how they wish to be ruled and by who. What has happened is that we have taken that today and it's become a mockery. What we call democracy in Nigeria today is essentially a feudal system that exists solely for the benefit of the rulers, and there is practically nothing in it for those who are being ruled. The essence of the state today appears to be the preservation of the ruling class in style.
If I can ask you,
yes, sir.
To me, what were those values of June 12 that you expected 21 years into the Fourth Republic, 27 years after June 12, 1993, we should have adopted?
I expected that by now, at a minimum, the vote will count. That's one. Because that would appear to be the hallmark of anything you call a democracy. But that is not the case in Nigeria today. The vote does not count. The will of the rulers imposed using the instrumentation of force, the police, thugs, and sometimes the courts itself, have become the expresser of the people's will and not necessarily the people's vote. That is on one hand.
Okay, go on.
I also expect that by now, the several questions of nationality and nationhood that have bedeviled Nigeria long before our independence, but have been compounded over the years of military rule, that those questions would have been answered. I expect that security should be much better than it is right now, but I regret, it pains me to say that if you place the map of Nigeria on the wall today and you were sticking red pins on the troubled areas of Nigeria, you'll be hard-pressed to find any part that is left without a red pin, because Nigeria is essentially a state at war with itself. I expect that by now, the right of the citizen should be a foregone conclusion. It shouldn't be something for which I have to beg a policeman. We shouldn't be talking end SARS.
One of the reasons we are talking about June 12, 1993
yes, sir.
Today,
yes, sir.
Even in the Fourth Republic, yes, is that many people pushed for the actualization of their will. You say that you call them rulers. I thought they were leaders, but you probably want to explain that as well. Now, that the citizens don't get their will, but the citizens got their will post-June 12 election because they insisted that government, that the military needed to go, and it was as a result of that the military stepped aside for the Fourth Republic. So how are the citizens today fighting for their own will?
Thank you. When your correspondent was speaking by Skype with there was a young lady, and she said, oh, today's youth are so focused on existence that they are not even, most of them do not even understand what June 12 stands for. What she said is a symptom, and I would like to explain. The Nigerian is linked to what I said earlier related to rulers as opposed to leaders. Leaders have destinations in view to which they are leading the people. Rulers invariably almost always live in the moment. They don't have any vision behind which to mobilize the people. The Nigerian state has weaponized poverty against its people. And when a people are necessarily concentrated solely on finding what to eat, what to drink, where to live, how to survive the several security challenges, and the many existential questions that you are asked just because you live in Nigeria, the chances are that those people are not likely to have the time to question the quality of governance that they are receiving or misrule, as the case might be.
Doesn't that also beg the question of how those rulers,
yes,
that you call them,
yes,
got into the place in the first place? Because they were elected.
Okay, let me explain this. Every system is designed to produce something or the other. So if you have designed the factory process and it is meant to produce cocoa paste at the end of the day, it is almost impossible, unless you re-engineer that system, for the system to produce water or to begin to produce sanitary pads. Is a function of what each system is designed to produce. Nigeria has 36 states, 774 local governments. The cost of governance, as determined by the structure, the governance structure set up by the Constitution that says we the people, where we the people never had a word to say concerning that Constitution. The maintenance of the superstructure of governance is too costly, and the system has assured that all you ever do is to maintain the governance system without concomitant spendings going to the provision of infrastructure. So what you have at the end of the day is that you have 15 million children of school age wandering the streets of Nigeria, and Mr. President is talking about spending money on education. He's talking about building bridges. Of what use are bridges and roads and trains that you have built when you have failed to build the most important segment of your nation? Did I say nation? Of your state, the citizens. Nigerians cannot even be validly called citizens because citizenship endures on equality. When you now have multiple levels of citizenship, to the point where the content of a man's citizenship is devalued, to the point where the policeman can simply point a gun at his head and shoot him without accountability, you then begin to ask yourself, exactly what sort of people, what sort of citizens, exactly what kind of votes do we really have? When you vote in Lagos, we all vote in Lagos and we speak all this Dogon Turenchi in Lagos. Go outside Lagos into the parts of Nigeria. He's talking about peace in the Niger Delta. What peace? The peace so that you can pay rent to warlords, so that you can have your oil rigs. What about the poor man and woman in the Niger Delta?
Okay. Well, let's get across to Louis Odion, who is Senior Technical Assistant on Media to the President. Okay, well, we'll get across to him much later.
I would actually like to get to Mr. Louis Odion because he was also a principal actor at the time. And he would probably speak to some of the things that happened at the time, especially what the media did, back then. I mean, you would also probably talk about some of the activities of the media at the time.
I'm able to, yeah.
How strong was it?
The media is only ever as strong as the citizenry. We were talking about a time when, even when I was in secondary school, I would buy newspapers.
That doesn't happen today.
Because the people have been focused on existential considerations. If all a man does...
Let's explore... I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
Let's explore that for a bit. You didn't have to have a parent or anybody breathe down on you.
Yeah.
Educate you, school you about June 12. You knew some of these things.
I was there. I
before
voted.
June 12. Exactly. The younger people of those days, 15 years, 14 years, 13 years, many of them were out on the streets in the post June 12 elections because they saw that things weren't going the way they were supposed to go. But today you saw what our correspondent went out to do, how they went out to do.
Yes.
They are not even interested. Many of them don't even know. These young people don't even know. 20 years ago, a governor was in Lagos. They don't even know him anymore.
It is not by accident. That is not an accident. things happen deliberately. When I was growing up, there was a premium placed on knowledge. Nigeria was a place where you could rise above the class into which you were born by sheer virtue of the fact that you had enough brains, the state provided enough space, and you could actualize yourself.
Wouldn't you also lay some of these, some of the faults,
Yes.
not say blame, some of the faults of this inadequate knowledge or education
Yes.
for the youth on the people to whom they were looking up?
There is no one to see up there. They are all down there. The people you call leaders, whom I call rulers, which one of them really would anyone employ to run a private industry?
No, I'm talking about parents, guardians, you know.
What
today.
parent? I'll give you an example. For me to come to your studio this morning, I had to be awake by 5 o'clock. The amount of man-hour that parents spend in traffic, going to work and back from work, what ends up happening is that the children are left to their own devices because parents are engaged in existential consideration. How much did any one of our parents here paid in school fees? The bulk of the payments being received by anyone in my generation goes towards the education of their children because the state has abandoned education. So what you have is that the average Nigerian is constantly on a rat race. When a man is impoverished, the poverty does not begin materially. It starts here. It starts up here.
But this poverty issue that you
Yes.
raised didn't start today, didn't start 4 years ago, didn't
It's a
start 5 years ago.
progressive thing.
Didn't start 20 years ago.
Is just accelerated, particularly more so with the onslaught of feudalism in Nigeria. What has happened is that people have been balkanized into classes. You either have or you don't have. When every time the only thing the man is thinking about is how to survive, how does he eat, what does he feel, the totality of his focus is on survivor. I'm not excusing the fact that you have intellectual decay. But intellectual decay only happens when first thing we used to talk when we started growing up, we were talking about infrastructural decay because there were infrastructures to decay. The infrastructures finished. We've decayed the totality of the infrastructure now. What started since about 10 years back is that the quality of the human mind started decaying.
But you know, do we have to wait for young people to remind us that we need to do something about the Electoral Act? Because now, looking at how we finished the last elections and where we are, because we did ask this question of the members of the National Assembly yesterday, and they said, well, look, there are procedures, there are certain things they needed to do hitting the ground running. But does that then, because they say, look, that doesn't mean that they won't address this matter. What do you think we should be doing by now about it?
The Electoral Act, when we talk incremental changes, is one of the things that you really need to look at. But I really don't believe that it is the Electoral Act itself that is the problem.
Even if we start with electronic voting? I mean, next election.
When we talk about electronic voting, let's first of all get something clear. First, we were going to be using, what was that lie that INEC said was that this card, biometrics and all of that. But there are serious evidences of the manipulations and frauds that went on in places where your cameras don't visit. And the fact remains that by the time the thing enters the judicial process, it becomes a toss-up. Fact is this: before you can begin to talk about electoral reforms, you must first of all respect the sanctity of a vote. That has nothing to do with laws. When the rulers have ab initio made up their minds that the vote of the man on the street would not count because they do not believe themselves accountable to that man.
But don't you think that if we improve the process by ensuring that, well, at least to a large extent, the voting becomes electronic, where the chances of manipulation is reduced to a great extent, wouldn't that help in any way to endanger confidence for voters?
For as long as our structure remains one where power remains unaccountable, and I'll tell you why it's unaccountable. When our fathers sat down and actually negotiated Nigeria, it was a parliamentary democracy. For you to be voted for, the people must have known you. It wasn't a function of money. Government has very little business with the regimentation of who should run or not run. The people who are the ones who knows who they know or they don't know. But when you now have a situation where we now practice what we call a presidential system, where the person you are even voting for is not related to you, you don't know him. He probably comes around, shares his rice. People they're hungry. So he shares his rice. Even Ekiti went a little further. We have stomach infrastructure. We have a new word for it. The only time a man requires stomach infrastructure is because he's starving. It doesn't even have any value for the vote. So you bring your 5,000, your 10,000, depending on where the votes are being counted. You bring your rice, the salt, and the different things that they have given. Because the vote has no value to the man in the first place. His life is not changed, whether it's the PDP, the APC, PPP, PUPUPU, whatever they call themselves. It's the same family.
You just mentioned a number of parties now, but one of the high points, one of the highlights of the June 12, 1993 election was the mode of the party system. It was a two-party system. There were 13 parties that were proscribed, and they all had to merge into a two-party system.
There's something about the elections of 1993 that we must not gloss over. And that is the fact that it was an unusual event. The people were determined to get rid of Babangida and the military. Yes, it was a two-party system, forced on Nigerians by Babangida and his many experiments at political engineering. For all his worth, if you even check out the history of Nigeria, there's always been a tendency to gravitate towards a two-party system. That's always been the Nigerian predilection. Even when you had three parties based on regions, eventually you find that coalitions were being formed. They would have emerged naturally. It's always the Nigerian situation. Even the American democracy, we say we copy. They have a multi-party democracy, but there are two dominant parties. Every presidential system eventually begins to gravitate towards the tribalism that breaks them down into two. That's why you have the Republicans on one hand, you have the Democrats on the other hand.
Wouldn't that happen in a parliamentary system?
It might, but the parliamentary system actually allows more room for multi-party democracy, because in reality, if it's a parliamentary system, it then means that all I really need is to be known within my constituency. I might then get into the parliament and become part of a voting bloc or align myself to a political platform. But the argument really is that in the kind of country in which we live, where you have many tribes and ethnicities, religious differences, and what have you, it would have been much better to retain the negotiated agreements that had always existed in this space.
Which was?
A parliamentary democracy. It's cheaper. It doesn't allow for this farce where
what about the quality of government? Governance.
See, they brought presidential system to Nigeria in 1979, a consequence of the Constitutional Assembly of 1977, 77. And here is the thing. It is not by accident that the presidential system wasn't what was voted in that assembly. It was forced on them by the Obasanjo government.
Couldn't the argument also have been that parliamentary system came to us because of our previous colonial masters?
But here is the thing. You can't run away from your history. Those same colonial masters introducing the parliamentary system also held constitutional conferences from Ibadan all the way to London. Several constitutional conferences were held. There was a Willings Commission on the right of the minorities as well. And the negotiated agreement agreed as between all the constituent parts of this country before independence was that we should have federating regions, one. Two, it should be a parliamentary system. That parliamentary system was what was in operation all through the years when we were practicing before the independence. And it was what was in place until the January coup of 1966. So the point is that if we have ever really tried on anything or practiced anything or sought to domesticate any sort of democracy, it was the parliamentary democracy. We became the beneficiaries of a unitary system masquerading as a presidential democracy by the grace of Obasanjo and his cohort, and again by the grace of Abdul Salam the second time around. Nigerians have never sat down anywhere to agree to be ruled in a presidential system predicated on 36 states, 774 local governments.
Are you asking for us to renegotiate our system of government?
It is inevitable. We can keep lying to ourselves and be telling ourselves we are in a democracy. I don't have to join in lying to myself. It's self-delusional to call what we have right now a democracy. It is not.
Okay. All right, well, don't forget that you can get out there and take a look at Twitter handle where they put out a question. What did you expect should have changed 21 years on to our democracy? Well, we did ask, is it education, security, electricity? Just go ahead, just let your views known, and well, we'll see some interesting comments as well, but we'll come back to that in just a moment. But yes, indeed, it's June 12th in the post-COVID era. We can't forget that. So we'd like to, at this point, appreciate all of the medical people and everyone who are in the front lines, just doing what they can to keep us all safe. All right, welcome back. Well, let's get to connect now with Louis Odion, who is the Senior Technical Assistant on Media to the President. He joins us via Zoom. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Well, the President's speech not getting a lot of reception here in the studio. Well, our guest here thinks that there are some points that the President has missed out. For instance, we've just had young people talking about the importance of the Electoral Act, what they need to do about all of those. Yes, the President spoke about several other things. But then, how do you respond to the very important components about elections and democracy, which he thinks was not copiously highlighted in this President's speech?
Hello? Hello?
Well, can you hear me? Okay.
Hello?
Yeah, Mr. Dewo, can hear you, but we need to be sure if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yes. I was just talking about, well, yes, we've heard the President's speech and all of the issues that he did highlight there. But right here in the studio, we've got to get through things that, look, even some of the young people who we just spoke to not long ago think that it's equally important for them or for the country to address the Electoral Act, which wasn't addressed in the President's speech.
Hello?
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Hello? Hello? Chamberlain, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thanks for having me. I think we will be reducing the argument to tokenism by saying that the President should go into little details. I think it's important to emphasize that our democracy is evolving and is growing. And there can be a better testimony to that than the outcome of the 2015 election. You know, it's the first time in our history that a sitting government would be removed by voters. And since then, I think the process is growing. I think one other point to note is that the last presidential election we had, I think there's a consensus that it was the first time in our history that money was not a factor. That money was not a factor, and that is a testimony to the honesty and integrity of Mr. President. Up until recently, if you wanted to run for
I was just wondering if you could hear me. I'm trying to understand what your point is when you say money was not a factor. If you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
How was money not a factor? Because, right before then, even at that time, we heard so many people speaking about inducement, even on the election day. INEC spoke about that. So what exactly is your point about money not being a factor?
Yes. Hey, I can't hear you. Yes. It's a fact that money didn't play a big role in the last presidential election. And for me, that is a significant progress. That's a sign that democracy is growing. We shouldn't expect that democracy will become mature overnight. It's a work in progress. It requires sustained effort to deepen the process. So I believe our democracy is growing. It's very convenient today to...
Pardon me to jump to put this in. So does that mean that all of those people who were talking about certain bullion van, they just fabricated all of those items?
Well, that's an opinion. People are entitled to their opinion. That's an opinion. It doesn't... I talk as somebody who is familiar with... the running of the media. If you ask any editor, any media manager, they will tell you that the advert taking for last presidential election was the lowest in recent times, and that is because Mr. President is not the type who will approve $2.1 billion.
Mr. Odion, that is not without prejudice to the fact that there was a lot of talk about vote buying during this last election and even the previous. How do you react to that?
No, that is an allegation. It has not been proven. That's an allegation. People always complain.
Mr. Odion, you are in the media. You've been in the media for long enough. How can anyone prove vote buying?
Is the point I'm making. Is the point I'm making. People keep saying that the election was purchased. It went to the highest bidder. It's always a common refrain whenever you had the election. I think the important thing is that the vote counted the last time. The presidential, the PDP had their time, and the Nigerians spoke loud and clear that they had confidence in President Muhammadu Buhari, and that was clearly reflected in the outcome of the election. So the argument about vote buying it will always come up. People always talk about even violence.
Well, if you take a look at the president's speech. Let me take you to some of the items the president spoke about in his speech. The power sector, where he says that the 11,000 megawatts target by 2023. But to many, they just think that the government keeps shifting the goalposts, because before then, during campaign, they had talked about way more than 11,000. In fact, I think it was 10,000 megawatts in a year, or is it the first 4 years? But 11,000 megawatts by 2023, isn't that moving the target and certainly not achieving the initial targets that the government has set for themselves?
No, it's not. It's not moving the goalposts in any way. You recall that when APC came into office, that was during the campaign. A promise was made that the power situation would be improved. But the truth of the matter is that when the government came in, they found that they had underestimated the rot. The sector was reformed by the preceding administration. And the truth of the matter is that the proper thing was not done. That is why we're having problems today. And if you recall, Lately, a conversation has begun with a view to reviewing the entire system to ensure that we have value. Recently, the federal government also entered into a partnership with Siemens, and the whole idea is to ensure that the proper thing is done. That is why the president is promising that all things being equal, we should be able to escalate our present capacity to 11,000.
But
right now,
if you remember, just one moment, Mr. Odion, if you also remember the members of the National Assembly, especially the leadership, the chairman of the National Assembly, has said on more than one occasion that there is a need to renegotiate or re-engineer, take another look at the entire privatization program of the power sector, because it's perhaps one of the reasons that the sector has not been working with so many variables to consider at any time, at any given time. Consequently, we're having challenges with the entire supply chain of the power sector. What do you think the body language of the executive is about that?
Yes, I think the National Assembly merely amplified what has been discussed at the presidency. The truth of the matter is that when the power sector was reformed under the previous administration, merit was not considered. Concessions were made to party supporters without technical knowledge. That accounts for a reason why we've not really made much progress in the power sector, because those who were assigned the responsibility of managing that sector, they didn't have the competence. And you can't make progress when you overlook that fundamental fact. That's the more reason why we are going into partnership now with Siemens that has technical knowledge that can improve the process. An argument has also been made that the challenge we have really is not so much for generation, but evacuating what has been generated and distributing. Of course, in the last decade or so, a lot have been done vis-a-vis setting up gas station, power station that can generate megawatt. But the challenge remains on evacuating what have been generated and distributing.
Well, if you would also remember, Mr. Odion, just one moment, if you also remember, you will know that to a large extent, there's been this talk about what you have just talked about, which is distribution. And also to a large extent, government still has, despite the privatization program and process, government still has critical stakes in the various elements of the power sector. We're conducting a poll. If you go to Sunrise Daily now, our Twitter handle, you'll find out that electricity is the #1 thing that people think over the past 21 years. The vote is still on. Yeah, the vote is still on, yes, but it seems that electricity is the leading thing that many people are asking for. And there's also the consideration that with all these signatures that have already been appended on behalf of Nigeria over the past 2 decades, to renegotiate those things would spell some, confusion in the mind of investors. So what's the plan to get this sector smoothly running so that government can achieve the target of 11,000 megawatts by 2023?
Same thing. Once you don't have those who understand the process, manning the commanding height, we continue to have problems. That's why the government has thought it necessary to engage Siemens that has the competence to help manage the process. It's like you are appointing a carpenter to be MD of a bank. There is no way the gaps will not show. So the point remains that once we don't have competent people managing those technical aspects, we will continue to have problems. And to be fair to government, a lot of resources have been made available to the operator of that sector. I think sometime last year or so, about 600 billion was made available to the GENCOs I'm talking about the generation company. They will continue to ask for money. But the truth of the matter is that they don't have the competence. And, you know, because some of these things are also legally binding, it's pretty hard to wake up one morning and say you
okay, Mr. John, if I could just bring this in, government has a stake still in all of those sectors, but everyone knows that there was a target that the party spoke about. And if you say, well, they're not competent, they can't do this, it appears as though at this level in governance, they can still be passing the buck. After the first term, this is the second term, they've got a hang of what's going on now. But there was a target that they set for themselves. So when you say they're not moving the post, could you remind us then, what was the target and why did you say they weren't shifting the goalpost?
No, I'm saying the same thing. I say when APC was aspiring to come to power 2015, of course we set high target for ourselves. We say that power
that 40,000 megawatts
should grow from 3,000 to 5,000 within a year, and the following year you escalate it to 7,000. But the truth of the matter is that the moment the government came in, they found that we underestimated the rot in the system. And I'm telling you, the system is the agreement is legally binding. So it wasn't possible to come in and say you are cancelling the entire process. So the government have been trying to push people faster than they probably would want to work. That is the truth of the matter. And it's never too late to do the right thing. It's the reason why the government has summoned the political winner to engage Siemens to ensure that the right thing is done. So we are basically saying the same thing. We came in with a lot of enthusiasm, with a lot of energy.
All right, just one more thing, because we are running thing on time. One of the things that the president also said is that there's going to have 1,000, gainful employment of sorts for young people throughout the 774 local governments in Nigeria. Some would say that that is a plan by your party to reward party adherence. Otherwise, what's the procedure for getting these people employed? 1,000 in each local government, 774 in Nigeria.
No, I think it's wrong. It's wrong to say, hello? I think it's wrong to say it's an attempt to reward party members. The truth of the matter is, following the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic that came in this January, President Buhari set up a committee headed by the vice president to come up with a program that can help to mitigate the economic consequence of the pandemic. So it's part of the plan. Part of the plan is to engage 1,000 workmen in each local government. And the modality to achieve that has already been rolled out by the Ministry of Labor. As a matter of fact, I remember the Minister of State for Labor has come out and said that there won't be any political interference. Stakeholders, including community leaders and civil society organizations, will be engaged in recruitment for this exercise. The whole idea is to get our youth engaged. They are going to be involved in road rehabilitation, major highway and rural roads. It's to ensure that they have income. So there is no politics behind it. The whole idea is to engage our teeming youth who are idle at the moment to ensure that they are gainfully employed. And they also contribute to national productivity. So there is no truth in the argument that is to reward party agents or party members. I don't think that is correct.
Okay, then Louis Odion, Senior Technical Assistant on Media to the President. Well, that is an area that we will focus on with a fine-tooth comb, I might add, in the days ahead. But thank you very much indeed for your thoughts this morning. Well, Mr. Dele, I mean, listening to some of these things, how does that resonate to people who listen to it? And how do you connect with this?
It's depressing. Depressing in the extreme. I hear the same nonsense being regurgitated year in, year out. So you're going to employ 1,000 youth per local government. If the Nigerian situation wasn't so tragic, it would be comedic in the extreme. We're a nation with a youth population approaching well in excess of 100 million. We have about 15 million children of school age, that's under the age of 14, roaming our streets. Our president is talking about employing 1,000 per local government. To do what? Would it not be better to find 1,000 startups, to find a way to incubate ideas in local government so that even if it's only 100 people that have been economically empowered and able to employ people because they are able to generate wealth, would that not make more sense? We export our cocoa, no value added to it. We can't even manufacture something as basic as chocolate. The government is not focused on a Marshall that starts the industrialization of Nigeria, but it's talking about, it is the same thing. You are turning Nigeria into one big house, an Amajiri system where the people are constantly dependent on the government for handouts so that they might survive.
I think we'll get more time to even bring in Mr. Louis Odion so he can respond broadly, because the House of Assembly are even thinking about stopping the movement of some of these other areas, but it's a matter, unfortunately, we couldn't connect properly. But we're back in a moment. We do thank you, though. Dele Farosimi is an author, a lawyer, writes several books about June 12th. We're back in a moment. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Well, we did ask you, we'll put up a Twitter question saying, what did you expect to have changed or to have improved 21 years into our democracy? So the first, there was education, economy, security, electricity. So look at that. About 8,216 people voted. And the final results, as you can see, there were almost hit the 10,000 people. I wish I had extended it for a little bit more.
This is modified option A4.
Well, 48% of the people who voted think, look, electricity is the number one thing for them.
I think as far as people are concerned, electricity answers the question of all. You know, if you get electricity right, we'll get education right, we'll get economy right, and, you know, it makes some sense for some people.
Yeah.
But, you know, right under the first one that I see, right under that one, Lochis says there should be one for all of the above. Do another poll.
I mean, that's what a lot of people are saying. That's what you get for writing jam a lot of times, maybe.
Well, even though I see Babalola saying Mr. Dele Farotimi is correct about talking about the parliamentary system of government, he thinks it will be the best for us in Nigeria. But who knows? Jury may be out on that. Frankas says it's 21 years after the Fourth Republic. We can't truly be convinced with the type of elections we conduct. I think government should accept failure. This is why the apathy shown during elections continue to increase exponentially, he thinks.
Oh, wow. I mean, there's a lot of comment, really, as you can see there. So let's get your opinion on this. I mean, we have response to today's meeting, but I'm sure Markwe wants to take a few, maybe.
Well, we see Austin here saying, look, the senior technical assistant to the president of media just said they didn't discover the rot in the system before setting their high target on electricity of 40,000 megawatts. And then says, where's the place of due diligence? Okay. Markwa?
Indeed, Chamberlain, we do have quite a bit of engagement in that particular tweet. I mean, the poll which we carried out, a lot of people have pretty strong views on reasons why they put out or why they picked a particular option instead of another. And I think one of the tweets to stand out for me, the people who vote education, this particular tweet from Kasarachi Leki says, education will improve the others. Show me a nation with illiterates, and I will show you a nation lacking security, electricity, and economy. You need educated security officials, electrical engineers, and economists to have those sectors work. Formal and informal education works. So, I mean, and you see somebody there supporting him, Chidebube Okore says, thankfully, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. I was surprised to see the results. Well, it's what it is. This is what the people believe. Electricity is one of the things that they believe should have changed for them. I mean, democracy, at the end of the day, you elect leaders, you hope that your votes will count so that your life will be changed positively, because that's why they present manifestos and things of the sort. And maybe that's why there'll be some debate as to whether or not people agree with Dele Farotimi when he says that the president's speech was a budget speech rather than a speech that actually dwells on Democracy Day. But we still have a lot of work to do with regards to making our votes count, gentlemen.
Yes, indeed. So there you go. That is it today. Thank you all for watching. Of course, we'll see you next week. I'm Chamberlain Oso.
I'm Kayode Okikiodo.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, well, this program will certainly continue in the evening. Do join us for the evening edition from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. tonight or thereabouts.